Hey, boys and girls, Doug Giles here. It's Warriors, Rich.
And Wildmen. What's happening, Doug?
A book's still happening, still crushing it, man. If Masculinity's Toxic, called Jesus Radioactive. Rich, I talked to the publisher yesterday. He said epic sales. So it looks like, it appears as if, Richard, that people are sick of the same bearded lady version of Christ that these emasculated preachers have been foisting on us poor plebeians in the flyover states, because it's striking a nerve, brother. It's striking a nerve. Hey, I also got to tell you real quick, Reveille Ranch. It's up in Burnett, Texas, this weekend, July 11th, 6 o'clock. I'm going to be speaking, and then Lieutenant Colonel Alan West is going to be speaking. It's going to be a Texas shindig, man. I guarantee, Rich, that there's not going to be any protesters there. They definitely won't enjoy it if they do try something, but it's going to be an epic event, and hopefully we get Lieutenant Colonel Alan West to get the GOP chair of the state of Texas, because that man will turn this state that's going a little blue, he'll turn it back to red, guaranteed. He's a force of nature. So I'll be speaking at 6, and Wes will be speaking at 7. So you Warriors and Wildmen listeners, if you're in the Texas Hill Country and you ain't got diddly squat to do on Saturday, come see us. All right, brother. So we got a special guest here. Introduce me to your amigo, your co-belligerent in all things Warriors and Wildmen related.
This is my friend Dave Clukey, and I'm saying your name.
Hey, Dave.
Right? Dave Clukey. And Dave, this is Doug, Warriors and Wildmen listeners.
Howdy.
This is Dave.
Morning.
And Dave's a friend of mine. I've known him for a little bit. I don't know, maybe 2 years. A little less.
Rich, you don't have
Maybe
friends.
3.
Maybe 3 years.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 years. Time flies because I'm having fun. I don't have a lot of friends. But
I didn't think you had anybody.
I want to read your bio.
Go for it.
I always know it's uncomfortable when people read your bio, especially when you're sitting there or if you're getting ready to speak or something. It's always kind of a weird thing. But people don't know you that are Warriors and Wildmen listeners, and they'll want to hear this. So, Lieutenant Colonel, retired David S. Clukey. That's legit right there, Dave. That's hardcore. Dave was commissioned as an officer in 1998 and spent the majority of his over 20 years in the military in the elite U.S. Army Special Forces Green Berets. Spent more than 5 years deployed to combat and other global operational assignments in a variety of leadership positions, from commanding a Special Forces A-team in combat to overseeing U.S. global counterterrorism initiatives. Dave served as the director of training for a Special Forces Regiment and was specially assessed and selected to oversee highly sensitive planning, coordination, deconfliction, and staffing for all U.S. global counterterrorism initiatives. Many of these efforts required approval from U.S. geographic combatant commanders and U.S. national command authorities. In this capacity and others, Dave oversaw the successful completion of thousands of projects and missions from start to finish. And I know this because I've had conversations with you. Dave's educated. Dave earned a Master's of Arts in Defense Analysis, specializing in irregular warfare from the Naval Postgraduate School. And Dave volunteers as a keynote speaker for Veterans Heritage Project, nonprofit organization dedicated to connecting students with veterans. He's a lifetime member of Special Forces Association, serves as the SFA's representative to the Unified Arizona Veterans. Dave also volunteers as Vice President of Family Programs for Arizona Chapter of the Association of the United States Army, and in the Circle of Distinction for Association for Career and Technical Education, Arizona. And Dave lives in Cave Creek. That's where I met him, Cave Creek, Arizona, with his wife and 2 children. He enjoys his leisure time gardening. I didn't know that, but that's nice. Reading, enjoying other outdoor activities, and cruising on his Harley-Davidson motorcycles, which he has nice bikes. One of them's really cool. I saw him on his really nice Road King recently, and I said, "You're still riding that old thing?" And the people that were looking at it looked at me like I was crazy.
Yep.
But it's a beautiful bike. But Dave, glad to have you on Warriors and Wildmen.
Hey, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great. So,
Yeah, thanks for your service, Dave, and thank you for making me feel lazy as shit for the last 30 years.
I have that effect on people. I apologize. Just
No, awesome stuff, brother. Awesome stuff, man. Glad to have you, buddy.
Thank you.
and so
Honored to be here.
I've been talking to Dave a little bit about coming on Warriors and Wildmen. He said, yeah, he'd love to come on, and we just haven't made it happen until recently. It was like, we just have to set a date and do it. So glad to have you on here. I think the Warriors and Wildmen listeners will be excited to hear about what you have to say. And so, quick question, just right off the bat. I have some questions, Doug. You can jump in anytime, but I wrote down some stuff. Green Beret. Yeah. But I also saw on all your different awards and stuff that you have a Ranger tab.
Yes.
So how does that work?
So, okay, there's a couple things. You have Army Special Forces, all under Army Special Operations Command.
Okay.
They are all considered RSOF, or Army Special Operations Forces.
Okay.
And the largest proponent within there is the Green Berets, Army Special Forces, and it comes down to mission. Now, there's Ranger School and there's Ranger Regiment. And I went to Ranger School back in 1998. It's like the Army weight loss program. I lost like 40 pounds. I went in weighing 225. Actually, I lost close to 70 pounds, graduated like 179, emaciated.
Wow.
That focuses really, it's the Army small unit tactics training school, and it's really a leadership course, although they don't call it that. You learn all about small unit maneuver. And, 66 days long. They start off at Fort Benning, Georgia, go up to Dahlonega in the mountains, and then you finish out in Florida in the swamp. So you train in different environments, and you don't get much sleep. You get to eat once every 24 hours, pretty much, and your meals are stacked. So you get 2 MREs, and you eat them within an hour's time frame. But, of course, patrolling functions, patrol base, rule security number 1, you have a bunch of things you got to accomplish, and then you can eat. So you shovel your food down, you don't get much sleep, maybe a napper for like 20, 30 minutes, and then you're back after it. So incredibly grueling. And, their primary mission is, so there's a big distinction I got to kind of lay out first. There's Ranger School, which just about everybody in the Army can go to now. And then there's Ranger Regiment. And Ranger Regiment is completely and distinctly different. It's a unit, it's a special operations unit that's an Army special operations unit, and their specialty is airfield seizure. They work work a lot with the Army's Delta Force, providing outer cordon security. So Delta will be doing their things like within the nucleus, if you will, of a circle, and the Rangers will be providing the outer perimeter of that security. So they are really America's elite infantry force.
Wow.
Truly. Army Special Forces, Green Berets, it's funny. A lot of people call in media, specifically call all special operations forces special forces. Well, no, there's really only one special forces, and that's Army Green Berets. And their mission is unconventional warfare. So to put it succinctly, unconventional warfare is basically you drop a team of 12 people off into a foreign country or into a contested area. They build up an army, train them, and can basically overthrow that government occupying power or establish a presence for whatever unique entity the U.S. is supporting. Unique in its mission, unique in its task organization, and it's the only entity out there that we have in the Department of Defense that can do exactly that. And another distinguishing characteristic is Army Special Forces all have a language capability. So they're regionally oriented. So you'll either learn French if you're working in West Africa, Tagalog if you're working in the Philippines, Mandarin, Russian, you name it. So
There you go, Doug.
Yeah, I was wondering when the Green Berets were going to be deployed into Seattle to overthrow CHOP or Chaz or CRAP or whatever it's called now. Because you talk about an enemy occupied force. Definitely not friendlies. Definitely from a domestic standpoint, enemies. And I got to tell you, Dave and Rich, just watching the left being hijacked by Marxist radicals. It's like nowadays, guys, if you're anti-communist, you're a racist. That's how they've completely hijacked the narrative. And I know that we're talking about Dave's life, but I'm sitting here listening to all the stuff and all the definitions and the deployment aspects and the reasons behind it. And we're being occupied right now, or they're trying to occupy us. And there's a big
They got shut
controversy.
down by the local police department in like T-2 seconds. The resistance was almost none. And then the head guy that they caught they put him on a stretcher, and he cried like a little girl. Like he was a little
They always do,
female
brother.
dog. He was like a little female dog crying like a little. You know what my thing is, Doug? Don't talk about your cause if you're not down to die for your cause. It's not a cause. You're a little protest. You're a little a millennial female dog trying to say I was there when it happened, get some pictures, and put it online. But you know what? When they start dying, all of a sudden they run home. They're like, well, I don't want to go to jail or die. It's like, well, then you don't have a cause. That's not a real cause. Anyway.
Yeah, I've got to.
There you go.
I've got to also, Dave. I took offense at something you said. It wounded me deeply.
Doug's
You said after Rangers school that you were an emaciated 179. I weigh 170, brother.
But you look good. You carry that weight well.
Doug, it's all because of the legs.
Man, I got so close, Dave, the other day to a pencil sharpener, I frickin' fell in it. Just
Well,
crazy.
It's pretty funny. At Ranger School, they shave your head bald, right? So I literally looked like a bald-headed monkey with a Walt Disney imagination when I graduated. Just big head, little tiny emaciated body. It was a sad state of affairs. But
I did the whole head shave. I saw Jason Statham in Transporter, and it was like, yeah, we're kind of similar, body builds, ectomorphs. So I went with it, man, and it looked like I had, full blown AIDS, or I was in the last vestiges of the Wuhan Weezer, about to take the big dirt nap. Didn't work well at all. And in my graduate degree, we had to have an ID so that we could get into seminary and stuff. And then happened to be picture time right after I shaved my head, and I can't find that ID, but that's the ugliest picture, bar none. Beats the hell out of all the stuff like in 3rd and 4th grade when you didn't have teeth and you're doing those school pics, and just hideous, man. Here's I got a serious question. How old were you when you joined up? When did you say, you know what? This is what I want to do. I want to make bad men scared.
It's funny you asked that. My son, literally 8-year-old, asked me that question last night at dinner, and I said, I don't know. It could have been like moments after I was born. I don't really recollect, but really as long as I can remember. I grew up in, believe it or not, Massachusetts, North Shore of Boston. There was a lot of farms and trees up there. Lost my accent. And but we used to play out in the woods constantly. We'd play Army. We'd jump in the swamps and do stupid stuff. But ever since I can remember, my dad was World War II, Korea, Vietnam guy. He was in the Air Force. Don't hold it against him. But I always knew that I wanted to be in the Army, and I always knew that I wanted to be Special Forces for literally as long as I could ever remember.
Yeah, I don't know hardly any young people that think about that at all nowadays. My dad was 17 when he joined the Army, and still 17 when he crossed the Atlantic and went to serve in Berlin. Who does that anymore, man? You look at all these kids and they got their heads buried in their iPhone or they're playing video games, and there's a lot of life out there to live, and the whole knowing what your calling is, being able to articulate it, when you're knee high to a grasshopper, and that's what you're focused on and dream about. Man, those kids, I don't know if I'm just running into all the crap kids that are out there, but to me, they're getting few and far between, especially when it comes to, and in particular, with police officers. Oh my God, man. Can you imagine wanting to step into that field in this fetid day? But we need them. You guys, you always have and always will be the first line of our defense for us to have this great American experiment in self-governance. And we sure as hell need a lot of young men and women to step into the fray on a continual 24/7 basis.
Well, Doug, think about this. When we were younger, my dad was a Marine. He was in Vietnam. My brother was 82nd Airborne. And my dad joined the military because that's what you did, right? That's what was going on. You're an American. That's what you do.
Yeah.
And my brother joined the Army under not so positive circumstances. He was in a lot of trouble. But it was a part of how we were raised,
jail,
right? But it was, it kind of like that. But it was a part of how we were raised, right? It was like, that's what you do. But now if you talk to any young people, when I talk to young people and they consider the military, they say, well, it's a good career, I can get my school paid for. Like, there's zero patriotism there's not any love for country. There's doesn't seem to be a sense of honor.
I think it's that's an interesting point. I think it's messaging. I think there's a lot of Vietnam era scar tissue still left over. I ended up spending 2 years in recruiting, believe it or not, and only 1% of our country currently serves. 1% of U.S. society serves, and it's actually, you know, the narrative that we were fighting against a lot of time is this is a last resort. And the counter narrative was, well, it may be, but I don't even know if you can qualify to get in. People don't realize how difficult it is to even
not just taking anybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. When they started the all-volunteer force in 1977, standards have just continuously gone up. With the ASVAB, they have to pass that, and our education is unfortunately deteriorated, so ASVAB scores have remained consistent. However, the ability of our youth to pass the ASVAB and get that qualifying score has gone down.
I never thought of that.
The medical piece, you know, we see it time and time again. Medically, there's so many kids out there that just can't pass the bare minimum medical requirements or physical requirements to get in. I'm talking body weight composition, being able to pass like the physical fitness test or requirements, and then, you know, looking at moral. Our kids, you know, they get themselves arrested or, you know, mixed up with the wrong crowd, unfortunately, and now they have a rap sheet.
Dave,
that just goes to your point that it's not easy to get in the military now. It's not.
It's not.
Good. It shouldn't be. You know, who wants any chucklehead in there, you know, at our front line of defense. Hey, Dave, I don't know if you want to comment on this, but I think Obama was a disaster for the military. I think he definitely whizzed on this, you know, I think, from, you know, just how I don't know. He wasn't that pro-American. He fired a lot of great generals. A lot of other ones just said, you know what, I'm retiring. Has there been a Trump bump that you can see with your buddies that are still in?
Well, I'll tell you, you know, I wish the president was as articulate now as he was back in like the 80s and 90s, because his message is really good. The delivery, unfortunately, always doesn't come out the way I think that he intends for it to. But if you listen to the inherent message and actually listen to what he's saying, it is incredibly positive and uniting. I think that, you know, he's done some wonders. I think he's trying to get us out of some places that we shouldn't be anymore. I think he's operationally repositioning forces to maximize our U.S. advantage. And he's listening to his advisors, which is completely contrary to the popular narrative, right? But, you know, look at Afghanistan, for example. I mean, we've been there so long, right?
Yeah. 20 years.
There comes a time where we have to say enough is enough, and the Afghan government has to take care of their own problems, and we need to reapportion our resources elsewhere. And it's not like there aren't other things going on in the world. And, you know, you look at the Germany piece is raising a lot of questions and eyebrows. Well, we're repositioning to Poland. It makes more sense to be there, right? I mean, if you look at
and they like us a little better.
Yeah, well, they do. And, you know, the Germans, well, we may have made them a little angry at us over time and beer drinking and fights over the years, but we also boosted their economy significantly. So that is another variable that nobody's talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they just look at these initiatives. And we've talked for a long time about getting out of Afghanistan. Well, now we're actually taking the proactive measures to deliberately do it in a manner in which is potentially sustainable, right? We still have partnership operations going on. There's still operations going on as we speak, but we're doing it in a manner that, hey, let's kind of ease off this and make it Afghan sustainable, and not, hey, let's throw all this money at the problem which we have,
right?
And try to win this fight with money and resources, which has proven unsuccessful.
And it's a short-term goal because it has to be self-sustaining.
It has
or
to
it's
be
not going to be a
self-sustaining.
long-term goal. I have a question, Dave, that been wanting to ask you for a while.
Okay.
So what does it mean that you're a combat diver? I want to know, because I'm a diver. I promise it has nothing to do with anything that you do, because I have fun, I roll out of a boat with my camera, and I hang out, and I take pictures of stuff, and swim with sharks, and you know what I mean? And I go back and post some pictures online. It's nothing like what
we just put on some Speedos. You know, we have to carry around a rubber ducky and a floaty.
There you go.
No,
And they fight the waves.
And then
I'm going to pick up my combat diver equipment today as soon as I leave.
And then we have I won't go there. But no, so that nobody really. Well, a lot of folks don't realize it because the Navy SEALs, that's their primary mission, but a lot of the special operations forces like Air Force Special Operations and the SEALs have the water as a gateway in their pipeline, and the pipeline is their training pipeline to become a special operator. Okay. And up front, the water is the big distinguisher. And the combat dive training, which the Navy is the proponency for, has gates that you have to accomplish in order to achieve combat diver. And the Army has special forces underwater operations teams. So they have one per company within a special forces company within the battalions. And these teams are one of the few that have to go through the same training. And interestingly enough, my buddy's dad, Alan Shoemate, he's a retired Army colonel. His dad was Walt Shoemate. And this guy was, there should be a ton of books about him. I get goosebumps when I think about it. He was a, MACV-SAW guy. He was one of the first in Project Delta. He actually was a cadre for Delta Force training and selection. And he also stood up the Special Forces Combat Dive School in Key West, Florida. Wow. So he had to go down there and do all those relationships with the Navy and, stand this thing up from scratch, which is absolutely incredible. But the training itself, you get down there, it's about 6 weeks now, and there's a 2-week pre-course that you have to go to called pre-scuba, where you have to be trained on and pass a series of gates in order to get in. And it's the stuff you've probably seen on TV with the naval drown proofing, where your hands and feet are bound and you have to bob and kind of float around and stuff. And
I like how he passes over that. I think that sucks, but go ahead.
Well, there's a series of gates and a series of high-level requirements, and the physical demands are incomparable to really any other course. So the mental and the physical discipline, because the water is the big distinguisher.
I heard it's the equalizer. It can break anybody.
You can. You can have the biggest, toughest, strongest person around. You put them in the water, and they're just, it deteriorates rapidly from there, right? So that course, I had the distinct privilege to stand up a Special Forces dive team. And, it's not every day that an officer gets to train up Special Forces NCOs to do anything, right? So non-commissioned officers are generally the trainers, not officers. So this is like, bass backwards. Yeah. But I ended up training them up, sent everybody down to Key West. The team room smelled like Ben Gay. And, I physically, we'd start out doing PT in the morning. I'd have them in the pool for about 3 or 4 hours. Then I'd have them in the surface swims in the afternoon. And, by the end of the day, they're physically exhausted. And then we'd wake up real early, wash and repeat for a 2-week time process before I sent them off to dive school. And everybody passed. Most interestingly, I had a guy on my team from Jamaica, Conrad. This guy, 1% body fat, he's Jamaican, African-American, so 1% body fat, dude just would sink. He was so negatively buoyant.
Could not float.
But, and he couldn't even swim. So I had to teach him how to swim before getting him through this elite course.
Wow.
And he had the heart of a lion. Now, he suffered, don't get me wrong, but I'm watching him one day. Sometimes this, it brings a tear to my eye just because the mental toughness he demonstrated swimming around that pool in what we called the weight belt swim. So you got 16 pounds of weight.
Wow.
You're swimming around the pool. You do have fins on, but everybody's clawing and scratching, and it's a bunch of people bumping up against each other. So it's a chaotic environment, and the whole point is to relax in this chaotic situation. And here he is, absolutely just suffering, combat doggy paddle, his form's all off, but he's not quitting. I'm like, if he doesn't touch the gunnel, which is the side of pool at this point, he's going to pass. I guarantee this isn't pretty what he's doing. It's not pretty at all. Right. But I guarantee if I send him down here, as long as he doesn't reach for the wall right now, because this is like the moment of truth, I'm confident to send him down to dive school and he'll pass. And there he was going by. He was really close, 3 inches away from the wall. No hand went up. He looked at it. I could see him fighting it, and he drove on. And it was just a thing of beauty. He went down there and passed. And this is somebody who couldn't even swim before that. So, yeah.
That's cool, man.
Just a testament to the human being, the human spirit.
Well, it's insane because, like I said, It's nothing like recreational diving. And anybody who's done recreational diving, if you go and do 4 dives in a day, and then say you do a dive at night and you get an hour between dives, so you do 5 dives. So that's a lot of diving, right?
Yeah.
You are finished at the end of that day.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
spent. Not just because of the physical, like what you're physically doing, but what's required on your body and breathing the air under pressure, all the different things, and just being in the water and all of this stuff. You're exhausted. So when you talk about 4 hours in the pool, you're not talking about hanging out with a gin and tonic and a cigar.
I wish.
Under an umbrella. You're talking about 4 hours of work in the pool before you start the surface swimming. And that's insane.
Oh, yeah. And the thing about this is, we use it as a means of infiltration. So we have to get to work. And what's unique about Special Forces is, well, we have specialty teams. Some are like Halo, like the military free fall, the skydivers. That's how they get to work. Incredibly viable means to get to where you're going, right? Very low signature. Nobody's going to see, especially
So that's their commute, basically.
That's how they commute.
You're saying, I'm getting to work. That's how I get to
For
work.
combat divers, that's how we commute. That's how we get to work is we'll, start off in a boat somewhere, maybe do an over the horizon movement on a Zodiac, low signature, and then get in the water and dive subsurface, right? Or maybe jump out of an airplane to the water and then go underwater.
That's
to
got to
the
suck.
beach. It's
probably a lot better rolling out of the Zodiac.
It's much more, or it's much less resource intensive because you have all this dive gear that you have to cache or kind of hide once you get on the shore. It's nighttime, always. Right? So you got to figure out a way to get it somewhere where people aren't going to see it during daylight. So there's all these planning factors and considerations, and then the navigation piece unto itself. You're underwater. You're basically connected to your team. So you got 12 people all on a buddy line, and then you have a navigator up front. So there's one person navigating, and everybody else has to rely on his ability to get you where you need to be.
And underwater navigation is a trick.
Oh yeah,
that's not a joke.
No,
it's funny. I was in an advanced diver course with my brother, and we were supposed to navigate together. And he said, and when he was in 82nd Airborne, he was a crew chief on a Blackhawk. So him and maps and everything, he's good to go, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, you do the compass, I'll do the kicks, we'll get it all figured out. So he keeps pushing me underwater, and I don't know what he's doing, and I'm getting mad at him because I'm the older brother, right? He's a lot bigger than me, but I'm the older brother. So when we get out of the water, he says, "You can't give me the compass and then hold on to me and drag me off course." He said, "And I'm trying to kick, and your little legs are going, and you're just dragging us." He said, "It was like
the synchronization, yeah."
But I can't even imagine being in a place like that underwater, and a whole team, depending on what. Obviously, he's good. They trust the guy, right? I mean, it's not a joke. Well, but you're using rebreathers, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I've never
no bubbles, no troubles.
Yeah.
So we use the rebreather. The cool thing about that is it's not like open circuit where bubbles occur in the water. This is all cycled through the same system. So you're kind of rebreathing a lot of the same air, so it gets reprocessed. So you get new air, but it's recycled.
Right. The carbon scrubs it, right? There's a carbon
scrubs it all out.
And then, is that an electronic rebreather? I'm not trying to get into any type classified stuff or anything but is that like everything's controlled by electronics?
No. I can't really get into the how it's designed. That is classified, but the cool aspect of it is the other thing about it. It's pretty toxic stuff too. So if something's wrong, it's
by the time
catastrophically
you're already
wrong.
unconscious.
Yeah. Well, no, but you have time to get to the surface, but then you're compromised. So it's what the biggest thing behind all of this is the planning and preparation. And it's one of the things that a lot of folks, I guess, don't consider is how much training, how much planning, how much preparation goes into all of this, and the level of attention to detail has to be profound, really. Because one mistake, like we just kind of highlighted, you set your kit up, your rig up wrong, somebody inspects it improperly, you're compromising not only potentially the person,
your team.
You're compromising the entire team and the mission. Yeah. So.
Wow. Yeah, and it's not like a typical dive situation where your only problem is getting to the surface. Getting to the surface could be the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you're pulling everybody else up. Not good.
Yeah, that's not good. All right. How about this, Dave? If somebody was thinking, I want to become a Green Beret.
Yeah.
Young person that's listening.
Yep.
What would you tell them?
Make sure it's what you want to do. Right. I am the, how do I say this? The anti-recruiter, because, I want the right people. Sometimes the folks that are so energetically passionate about joining aren't necessarily the right people. The ones that, say all the time, I want to be in the Army, they wear Army stuff, and it's kind of like, okay, that's cool. And I appreciate the fact that you're supportive, but this is a mindset. And this is something, you have to be willing to commit. It's a commitment. And it's in Special Forces in particular, it's not about you. It's about the team. It's about the collective. It's about selflessness. And, it's also about courage and complete candor. And you have to be honest, because when you get in a team environment, you're in a very small environment, right? You're talking about 12 guys, and now girls, because they allow women in Special Forces now, and they just had their first graduate. But you're talking about a very small unit. So if you are unwilling to be a team player, and you are unwilling to swallow your pride, and you're unwilling to listen to others that may have more experience than you, that it's the wrong environment for you.
So that's an interesting thing, because you got a lot of guys that are obviously like type A personalities that would be on a team. You don't have one guy like that. You have a lot of guys like that.
Every single person there is super type A personality.
Everybody's a leader. Everybody. I mean, just the fact that you can make it on the team.
Yes.
So that's not an easy thing. You're not asking some passive person to say, let this guy be the lead.
No.
So is that a trick? Is that pretty?
Well, I'll tell you, that's why leadership is key. Because if you don't demonstrate the confidence, and you're not providing the leadership that they need, and you're not being transparent, and the biggest, I think, distinguisher between Special Forces, well, there's a lot, but one of them is the so what. People will do absolutely anything that you ask for them or ask of them for two reasons. One, you're willing to do it yourself, and two, you explain to them the why. Like, here's why we're doing it. Sometimes you don't have time for that, right? But in most cases, it's like as long as you're willing to explain, they'll be like, oh. And the funny thing that I found...
And you earn their trust in that, so that when you don't have time to explain, then they'll do it and you can explain later.
Oh, yeah. A funny story, I had a young EXO, and he ended up getting removed from his team, and I saw great potential in him, so I moved him up to my executive officer. I could have done a lot worse, but he had great potential. And I had this old salty Special Forces E7, career E7 type that we call them, guys that are just team guys.
He's in his spot.
They don't want to get promoted. They're happy and they excel on a team. And these are some of the best guys. And you could not tell Rodney to do anything. You could not say, you will do this, or be directive. That immediate shutdown. And so there was friction between my XO and him because of exactly that. He thought, I'm an officer, he's an NCO, I direct him. No, not happening. Especially not with Rodney. And he's like a microcosm, or he's like one example of like this culture.
Sure.
But if you happen to like make a casual observation, it's like, man, that hole's getting pretty big, or somebody could probably get hurt in there. Or you simply said, is there any way you think you could probably fix that? You will have like the Taj Mahal. He won't even he won't just like fix the hole.
He's a leader.
He's a leader, but he's not the type of guy that he didn't go Special Forces to be told what to do.
Right.
He went Special Forces so he could demonstrate his individual initiative, his selflessness, and his commitment to the greater good of the team.
That's cool.
Yeah. And
so it's learning how to work with guys like that.
Exactly.
Why butt heads with a guy like that when he wants to be on your team?
Exactly. And these personalities are the type that, if there's gunfire, they're running towards it. They are not going the opposite direction. And a lot of times these are the type of folks that you got to kind of reel in, because they're so they have so much individual initiative and they care so much. And if you ever get in a fight with them, Lord have mercy on your soul.
Really?
Yeah. The violence that these men are capable of is absolutely unbelievable, and they are incredibly well trained and good at it. Thank God they're in the U.S.
Yeah,
right.
It's good that they're on our team.
Unbelievable, right? Americans, and these are the type of folks that simply will not quit. They're, it's like the knight from Monty Python's
He wouldn't
search
stop.
for the Holy Grail.
It's a flesh wound. Right?
Yeah, it's merely a flesh wound, right? That's how their mindsets are, and they won't stop. They'll keep going. It's
Wow.
absolutely, it's a beautiful thing. It truly is. And serving with them and leading them is really a privilege.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. So here's a question for you. I don't know how you want to deal with this, but have you ever been wounded in combat?
Yeah, I was blown up. I was blown up by an IED back in 2004. We probably all were authorized Purple Hearts, but we all refused because all we could think about was folks that lost their arms, lost their eyeballs, lower leg or leg amputee, and it was kind of like I have a scratch, right? So we all felt disingenuous, looking for that, type of I see it as a big deal. And although warranted, I see, to me, there's discretion. And, some folks, they really earn their Purple Heart. And they walk around the rest of their life. I think of the burn victims, from IEDs and stuff like that. We were very fortunate. It was a deep-seated IED. And the soil in Afghanistan is very similar to here in Arizona, where it's like concrete.
So it made the blast go up.
The blast was deep, huge crater, pushed us up in the air and back down we were in a Land Rover.
Really?
Yeah. And
Special Forces Land Rover.
Yeah. And it was modified. We had like a little mounted 240 in the back and stuff. But anyway, we were able to literally reconnect the hose in the engine and drive away.
Wow.
That was it. But it was a hard lesson learned. Right. This was kind of close to the beginning of our deployment. We were actually operating. Have you seen the movie The Outpost?
Yeah. Matter of fact, I just watched it this week.
Yeah, I just watched it too. And Fob Bostic was what we built. It used to be Fire Base and Array. So we're up there. I think that whole thing went down in like 2009, I guess.
Yeah, that's what it said, 2009.
So we built Fire Base and Array from a poppy field in a mud kalat. Half of a kalat on the Konar River.
What's a kalat?
It's like a mud structure, a traditional Persian mud house, right? Kind of looks like a little fortress. They have walls around it and stuff, but it's all like mud based. And we ended up building Fire Base and Array, which turned into, because Array is a little village there, and it ended up ultimately turning in years later into Fob Bostic. And we were up in those areas, the Korengal Valley, from Lone Survivor. We did operations down in there. We did operations up in Kamdesh and Kamu, where the outpost was in Kamdesh. And the roads, they depicted it well in the movie.
Yeah, that was scary.
Like literally 500, 600,000 foot drops. And you're basically
at
hugging
a crappy
cliff
little road.
And this little unimproved road. And it's funny, one time, both times we went to this village, we actually pissed off a village elder because it was over in this little area called Gaurdesh, which is to the northeast, kind of closer to the Pakistan border than Kamdesh is. And the roads there were even more severe. I'd never seen anything like it. You talk about pucker factor, you're like, don't look. And, both times we were in that village, there was a flash flood. So the village elders, like, we've never had a flash flood here, but both times you idiots show up.
So it was your guys'
There's
fault.
a flood. Yeah, it is like, please don't come back.
That's awesome.
But here's the point. We ended up having a portion of the road washed out, 500-foot drop. So we're sitting there improvising with logs, like they have huge timber, kind of like, Arizona has, like old growth trees. And, we're putting them down over this, 20-foot washout with a 500-foot drop, so zero margin for error. And we literally ended up having to back some of the vehicles over it. Oh yeah, I got pictures. It was
That's
crazy.
scary.
It was craziness. But yeah.
It's interesting. You mentioned Lone Survivor. So let me say this. Watching UFC.
Yeah.
I love UFC. I wrestled. I trained a little bit. But watching that, one of the things I realized, one of my favorite fighters is Cain Velasquez. I think he was the greatest heavyweight, and especially he didn't look anything like, but he was amazing, right? He's an amazing fighter. But he had issues with being durable, back issues, injuries constantly. Yeah. I also found when I wrestled, I wasn't as durable as I wanted to be at the level that I was competing at. I was actually getting hurt quite a bit, and so I thought about that. You could be the best. You can have the right mentality. You can have the right training. You can have, but if you're not physically gifted with something to start with, the durability factor. So that leading into watching Lone Survivor. When I watch Lone Survivor, if I watch a movie that's not true, I typically don't even care. I'm not even paying attention. When I was watching that movie, I was paying attention to that movie. And the thing that shocked me the most about it was the physical endurance and the physical durability of the guys that were running in that movie. And when I saw them jumping off ledges and rolling down the mountain, I thought, I could want to all I want to. My body would not handle that kind of damage. But some of these guys. This is why I'm saying that. When I saw that, I realized that, and you could correct me if I'm wrong. You would know. But people that are in high level special forces like that, they would be like athletes, like the top tier athletes.
Yes.
In durability and athleticism.
Yeah.
And so it would be like my dream was to be in the Olympics and in wrestling. And I gave it everything I had. I'm telling you, if I would have had the ability, I would have been an Olympic gold medalist. I didn't have it. I didn't have the physical durability, but also didn't have the gifting to be at that level. I went to those levels as I was approaching that level, and I found out there's a notch above that, and then there was a notch above that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to make it. So I had everything I committed to, but I couldn't do it, just wasn't able to do it. So I would think that would be the case in something like that level of special forces, that there would be guys that would want to. But if you're not physically able to do those things, it doesn't matter how much you want to.
Yeah, a lot of times, the way Hollywood presents it, I mean, the way they used to present it, you'd see guys like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Right. And we have those guys, right? But it's more of a mental thing, and it's more of an endurance thing. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of times, guys would go down range and they'd get bored and they'd yoke up. They get all muscle bound and stuff. But I always found that to be excess. And when you're operating in an environment like Nuristan or Konar with this mountainous terrain, and the only way you can get out and
you want less of an oxygen requirement, not more.
Exactly. You want to be cardiovascularly sound, and it's more functional fitness. And it's neat because when I grew up in the Army, it was you'd run in the morning and you'd mostly run in the morning at PT and do whatever else, but in the afternoon is weight training. But the way the Army evolved is they understood that we're dealing with durability issues. People are lifting too much and they're blowing out their knees, the shoulders back, all this kind of stuff. Plus the pounding the running does on your back, especially if you're over 200-pound individual. So they have these things called the Thor 3s and all the special forces groups now. It's tactical human optimization, rehabilitation, and recovery, where they have sports psychologists, they have physical therapists, and they have...
Did it just happen to be called Thor, or did they work it so they could call it that?
Well, I think there's some playing with words, but they found it, right?
All right,
They got there.
That's great.
And it's pretty neat. But these facilities are amazing. And the genesis for this happened probably mid-2000s. And of course, with anything new, people are averse to it, especially the older guys. Are like, we train 90s, right? We run in the morning, we lift heavy weights. That's what we do. But what they found was the durability, the holistic, physical fitness and ability to really maximize folks' potential happen. And everybody started buying into it. And they could tailor workouts specifically for teams. So if you were a mountain team, they would design a workout for you so you could be better mountaineer.
Well,
right?
that sounds like it would be common sense, right? But it's not that common. Like somebody had to think of that.
Well, you're dealing
but that
with,
sounds great.
You're dealing with, all right, people are averse to change. And right, so change bad, right?
And
so
traditions
but this program is absolutely amazing. And one of the most beautiful aspects of it is take a wounded warrior. And I'm going to use somebody, I'm going to name drop because I'm incredibly proud of him. This dude is like a 6'6" mountain of a man. He was like 275 pounds. He's a excuse my French, he's a masshole from Boston. And, he ended up being getting 3 Purple Hearts, shot a couple times, and then he actually got shot through his femur and ended up being an upper leg amputee.
Whoa.
Because of the Thor program, he was able to physically rehabilitate and go back to a special forces team and did a fit to fight test. And
wow.
And the same guy ended up becoming a warrant officer. There's an incredible narrative with his story. He was actually on TED Talks with his Boston accent, which is classic. But he ended up just recently graduating from the combat diver qualification course, the first upper amputee to ever accomplish something like that. And when you talk about the human resiliency, the human spirit, and people's ability to overcome incredible adversity, there is no better example than Nick Lavery. So that's the individual. But talking about the physical aspects of it, the durability aspects of it, I think there's also the biggest aspect is the mental. Mm-hmm. But of course, the responsible training goes right along with it. And they have dietitians there too. Mm-hmm. I mean, so we used to beast the protein shakes and all that kind of stuff. And they're like, maybe you might want to look at exploring this other diet. So, but no,
some more modern scientific type stuff.
Absolutely.
That's great.
But you are dealing with cavemen, so it's all good.
And that's also a good thing. Okay, here's a question for you. What was it like the first time that you were under fire?
It was surreal. So the first time I was under fire was actually an interesting and unique experience. So we had just gone through the IED that happened. And then we did a nighttime infiltration to get this local bad guy, which we actually almost landed the helicopters on. He was in the cornfield. We saw a guy running. It was him. Missed him. But we ended up doing this. This is like 3 a.m. We ended up doing a medical thing for the village. And this is at 6,000 feet. And we were not acclimated yet. So this is very early on in the deployment. This is back in 2004. And again, this is back in that area where the movie The Outpost was. So you can imagine the severity, the mountainous terrain, and the austerity of it all. And this is before, any of the infrastructure that they had later on, especially like 2009 and beyond timeframe. So we were way out there. So we start off and we're climbing all day long. We go over our huge hill, and an anecdote. We're struggling to get up this hill because of the elevation and the just how steep the grade was. We were climbing up, and the Afghans were passing us, and they're like, "Sir, want me to carry your bag, sir?" And we're like, we're going, but we're dying. Fast forward a couple of months, and we're like cruising up the hill, and they have to catch up with us because we're acclimated. And
isn't it great how fast your body can lose red blood cells when you drop down out of elevation? How long it takes to build them up when you? It
is a process, but right. So we're traveling all day long, right? And we're literally all day, and it's starting to get dark out, and we have bad communications because we're in the Hindu Kush, and there's commo or communication just sucks. No matter, even if you have SATCOM, it sucks. It's hard to achieve. So here we are. It goes from 8,000 feet to 9,000 feet in about 1,000 meters, or about a kilometer. Right? We start getting shot at. So here we are.
So you're on the hill.
So we're on this hill in this grade, and we look up, and there's a saddle, which is like a kind of a depression between, looks like a horse saddle. So just imagine a horse saddle, and you got a 10,800 foot mountain to really, I think it was the east. And then we had a 14,000 or 13 or 14,000 foot mountain to the west. And we're making our way up to this saddle, and we're getting shot at. So now we're bounding up this hill. And, these are pop shots at this point. I'd like to say sniper fire, but their aim was probably as good as my cell phones. So, it was bad. And we're kind of, and at this point, we had been walking all day. We're not acclimated to the environment, and we're exhausted. And so we get up to this 9,000 foot saddle, and then it happens. All hell break loose. So it's an ambush on 3 sides. And I'll never forget looking down and seeing my team sergeant. This is like pandemonium. All you can hear is AK fire. All you can see is gun and bullets kind of zooming in and hearing it and the crack and all that stuff. And I look down, and I'm on this little rock outcropping that has some rocks behind it, and he's just walking. He's so tired. He's just like, forget it, whatever. If I get shot, I get shot at this point. It's like, Jesus, I'm so tired, right? So he's walking casually up as all this pandemonium is going on. And I'm standing I told you about that rock outcropping. There's an old growth tree right by me too. So I look at this and I see bullets like smashing against this tree. So I'm like, okay, I better get on the other side of that tree. I go to the other side and the same thing happens. I'm like, alrighty then. So we ended up calling in for close air support miraculously somehow, maybe because of the moon and the stars aligned properly, we were able to get communications, and we were able to call in some A-10s, and we ended up having a drop.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, that was little heart emoticons, right? I mean,
they weren't
happy
to see A-10s.
They weren't happy. We were extremely happy. They did some gun runs with the minigun, and then we ended up dropping danger close, and we were able to vector them in, determine like where they were, and drop on them. And the irony of that was it was danger close, it was above us. So when the explosion happened, gravity happened with the rocks that were up there. Yeah, so we all had to duck and cover. So it was a very unique and interesting experience. And it was my Air Force Special Tactics Squadron guy, which was he was the guy controlling the aircraft. He had just got in theater. This was his first firefight as well, and he was not acclimated. He's like, gee, thanks for that.
Yeah, really.
But it was, and miraculously with that one, nobody was wounded. Everybody came out okay. It was just a crazy, almost out of body experience. That was my first firefight. So
when you were thinking about it later, did it freak you out? Because sometimes things happen. I was on a plane that was landing one time, and I looked out the window. It was a 747 landing in Japan, and the left wing was about 5 feet above the runway because it was doing this on the way in, and they do that. But I look out the window, and I see it right above the runway. When they hit, the plane starts skidding, and luggage starts shooting out of the overhead bins. People are freaking out, and I'm just sitting there like, what's going on? And then when we were walking off the plane, then I got scared. I never got scared when it was happening, but when I was walking out of the plane, I got scared later. It was weird.
Yeah, I don't know, because I just remember, like, I was tired, right? We were all tired. We were all, we knew we had to pull security that night, and we knew it wasn't over because we still had the next day, and then obviously, we'd have to hunt down and get the battle damage assessment as soon as it was feasible, and get up on that 10,800 foot mountain, which we ended up hiking the next day. But yeah.
So you were still in it. So it wasn't like you were back at home thinking about it. Like you were still in it, and it was still ongoing.
I don't think I thought about the surreal nature of it until maybe years later, honestly. Really? Yeah. It was one of those things where we were consistently engaged, consistently busy, and we really didn't have time to sit back and, quietly reflect on that.
That makes sense. I never thought about that.
So, yeah.
Great. One last question.
Sure.
This is a tough one, I think.
Okay.
So how hard has what you did in the military, how hard was that on your family?
Yeah. That was, I was literally a non-player in my family for really the greater half of 10 years. So actually probably greater than that. So from 2002, where we call it BK, before kids, right? So 2002, and I went to the Special Forces qualification course to, when I showed up to group in early 2004, I was gone all the way up until probably the day I retired. And it was due to a number of factors. 3rd Special Forces Group, that was the unit I was assigned. We were doing back-to-back Afghan deployments. And, when I say back-to-back, it was, 6 months deployed, translate 8 months for the month prior and the month after, come back, get leave, basically do all the training, certifications, qualifications, all of the myriad of things that we needed to do for sustainment and training capacity, followed up by a pre-mission training with about another month maybe off, and then you're gone again. And that was life. And then finally, I believe it was in 2006 timeframe, so that's 04 and 05, and then in 06 they changed it to they created a larger gap between deployments and tried to bring in more special forces groups, but there's only so many to go around, and there's a lot of requirements in the world. I ended up doing what they call foreign internal defense. I ended up doing a mission to Africa between Afghan deployments, and knocked out 6 weeks of dive school before that. And then, and then 6 weeks of training, 2 weeks for a dive requal, and then 4 weeks in the desert training immediately after that. And then it was right back after it. And there was more training requirements. And then we deployed again. So I was a virtual non-player. And
your kids are how old now?
So now, and that's why I retired, was for them. My son is 8 and my daughter's 11. And when I ended up taking command, we made the worst decision ever to do a geographic separation where my family stayed at Fort Bragg. And I had just came from a job where I was basically on call 24/7. I worked basically before the sun came up and came home well after the sun came down, and every other weekend. So it was a very demanding job. And when I did come home, I was a zombie too.
Sure.
Because it just mentally exhausted. But that decision right there almost destroyed our marriage, because the 2-year separation in battalion command, and then my follow-on assignment, had I stayed in, would have been to Special Operations Command Europe, where it would have been more life on the shelf. It was a very demanding job that they had planned for me. And the alternative was to go back to Bragg or Fort Bragg and go back to where I worked before at JSOC. And again, no matter how you cut it, it's a demanding job. Very rewarding work, but very taxing in the family. Mm-hmm. So my wife, fortunately, is very, very independent. She is a superhero in the real, in every measurable way. She was managing a house. She was managing the kids. She was managing the finances. She was working a full-time job and taking care of our family at the Special Forces Group. Incidentally, I mean, she's such a superhero. She was actually recognized as one of 6 ladies that they do annually with what we hold in very high regard, the Maggie Ray Award. Maggie Ray was an actress and a comedian who, during the Vietnam era, was kind of like Bob Hope, where she, but her focus was with the A-teams in Vietnam, and she'd be out in the remote outstations and fire bases. And provide, entertainment and some semblance of relief for these guys that are constantly in the fight. So we ended up in Washington, D.C., got to meet Ross Perot, and he was, rest his soul. All he wanted was chocolate, which is really funny. And they had no chocolate for the man. But anyway, we got to meet him, and, she was recognized for all of her sacrifice. And what she did, and she'll downplay it all the time, is she created family. And she donated thousands of miles. She had frequent flyer miles for work, and she donated them to families so they could go see their husbands up in Walter Reed for, the guys that came back kind of messed up. And, fortunately for me, I married a superhero, and we were able to sustain. And I think one of the hardest things for us, not talking about the military aspect of it all and me being gone, was the reassimilation piece. Now I'm not gone, and I'm around all the time. Hi, she's like, what are you doing? I'm here. Uh-oh, right? So there's a new whole set of obstacles.
Yeah, because she's used to running the show.
Absolutely. And now she's got me to disrupt.
Right.
So it took literally took about a year and a half. Literally took about till yesterday, 2 years to figure this all out. But and we see this with a lot of military families, especially in the special operations community. The divorce rate is unfortunately very high. Not just because of the duration and frequency of deployments and operational tempo that we call it, and training and everything else, but also that, once these guys retire, they're there. And it's a whole new adaptation.
Changes.
Yeah, you got to adapt to it. Completely different environment. Even if they're working a 9 to 5, they're still always there. And, wives, to their credit, are, especially, these military wives in the special operations community that endure, are incredibly independent people.
Yeah.
And have become, I don't want to say accustomed, but they're very used to, having to manage everything without their husbands around. Yeah. And when we came in, it was, we'd come in, we'd disrupt and leave. We'd make a big mess. We'd leave our shoes on the floor.
Trying to change the way things are done.
Right. This is how it's going to be done now. And we had briefings about it too. But of course, every single one of us screwed it up every single time. Again, in every measurable way to piss our wives off. But then we'd deploy again and everything would go back to stasis. But that was for me, and I know there's a lot of other families out there that kind of dealt with the same thing of that, the reassimilation and reintegration process and learning to live with each other as a couple and a team and breaking down the fact that she no longer has to take care of everything. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. And then, because I'm friends with you on Facebook, I see you're with your kids and your wife a lot. And so that's the thing that made me think about that. I was thinking that had to be a big adjustment, not just for them, but also for you. That's a whole different thing. And you can't get
Still
those
adjusting.
years back, but you're obviously investing in your kids, and that's...
Oh, yeah.
That's great.
Can't get that time back. I'll tell you, deciding to retire was the hardest decision I ever had to make in my life. It really was. I loved what I did. I was good at what I did. And, I found purpose in what I did. And, it was so hard. But it was also the best decision I ever made, especially when I look at my kids' growth. I look at our organic family and how far we've come. And, the funny thing is my daughter, she has dyslexia, so she is not a quitter at all. Like, she's had to work harder at everything.
Sure.
And that camping trip you just brought up when we went kayaking up to Blue Ridge Reservoir, and one of the dads had his son to occupy time, a genius. He had a handsaw, and he had about this, 2 foot huge log that he said, you saw through that, I'll give you $200. And then we come over there, and I'm like, oh, they're going to saw through it. Dylan, like my daughter will not stop. Like, she is not a quitter. It's unbelievable. It's a beautiful thing to see. And I'm like, look, you better lower that cost amount because they're going to saw through it. And I guarantee you they do it within the next 2 hours. They did.
That's awesome.
She won $40. She got a doll, and apparently she wanted some, what's it called? There's some fancy shoes or something.
Oh,
I
that's
swear
cool.
the money was burning a hole in her pocket.
The power of incentive, right?
Oh, yeah. And she won't stop. She won't quit. I'm like, look, seriously, take it down from $200. If you don't have $200 in your pocket, lower it to whatever you have.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on, Dave. And
Absolutely.
I know we're going to talk about some other things, but I think it was important to hear that stuff because although it may seem normal to you, to the rest of us, it's not normal. And we don't know the sacrifices. I mean, we can imagine, but unless we talk about it, we don't know. And I know the Warriors and Wildmen listeners, they appreciate it. And we appreciate your service. And you know, Dave, because we've talked before, how much I appreciate you and respect you as a friend, too. And so really want to thank you for coming on, taking the time to talk to us a little bit about what that life is like. So it's not the movies.
No.
It's real people living real lives. So really appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thank you. My honor to be here. It's been a long time coming. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad we did it, right?
Heck yeah.
All right. Warriors and Wildmen, go to warriorsandwildmen.com, subscribe, like us, love us, find us on social media wherever we are. If you want to help send this message out, swipe the plastic. You can do that. And until then, Warriors and Wildmen out.